Welcome to A&N In Depth. Today we're talking with Dr. Lisa Beardsley-Hardy, who is the Education Director for the Seventh-day Adventist World Church. Lisa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation to talk with you today, Sam.
Lisa, tell me, how many years have you led the education department here?
For the last 16 years, I've been here at the General Conference, but I was elected as director in 2010.
And how has it been this time?
This is an exciting job. In fact, I think it's the best job in the General Conference. If I think of medicine, it's like obstetrics and the birthing of new life. I don't deal with pathology per se, or fixing things, or doing surgeries, or amputating things generally. I get to celebrate the young people and their growth and development.
We have 2 million students that today will be educated in our school system. That is a lot of people.
Yeah, and in fact, this year we've made a recovery. During COVID, after COVID, we lost about 21,000 students. And that doesn't mean lost to the illness, but lost from the impact of school closures and school reopening and the economic impact that it had on so many families. But now I saw the latest statistics, and we've more than doubled the losses. So we have more than 40,000 students that we've regained. So we're about 2,064,000 students. It's a lot of students, and we celebrate every one of them.
That is fantastic. Your main responsibility, would it be fair to say that your main responsibility here as a department is the accreditation?
That's correct.
Of our universities and academic institutions.
That's right.
What does that mean? What is the accreditation process?
Well, we do directly oversee the accreditation for our universities and colleges, and that's about 117 at present. And there are many more in the pipeline that are seeking accreditation. But the ones that are accredited are 117. Well, we also oversee the accreditation of our mid-level institutions. That's post-secondary institutions. Many of these are hospital-based nursing programs, for instance, vocational training programs, and our secondary schools. We set the standards in collaboration with the world field, and then we coordinate with experts. Over 1,000 different experts have participated in accreditation visits during the last quinquennium. We actually perform site visits. It's like an academic audit where we interview faculty, we interview students, we eat the food in the cafeteria. Sometimes we sleep on the campuses in the guest rooms, not in the residence halls, but we actually take a snapshot and perform an audit of what's happening on the campus. But it's based on a self-study that the institution has done itself first. And we affirm and provide recommendations. It is a fabulous system by which we bring expertise. I remember I was on a site visit once at one of our most remote campuses, Sonoma College. It takes 2 days to get there. It's a tiny speck in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Wow. And when we were there, we were able to bring some world-class expertise. One of the members of the team had a PhD from Oxford University. Was able to entice her. You might know who it is because she happened to be very interested in birds, and Papua New Guinea has some exotic birds of paradise. So when I said we need somebody in theology, it wasn't too hard to twist her arm.
Sign me up.
But we could bring her with his PhD or DPhil from Oxford University all the way to Sonoma College and bring expertise. Wow. Any organization can get expertise only one of two ways. You make it or you buy it. So we train it, we bring it, we buy it, in essence, by bringing it from another part of the world, and this ensures consistency in standards. Students who attend a AAA accredited school, even if their own government does not recognize that degree, they can take that degree and transfer to another Adventist school anywhere in the world.
That is a great benefit. I went to one of those trips in Poland, our higher education institution there. It was grueling. every element of the school is analyzed. You know, the size of the library, how many books they have for each of the courses,
That's right.
the environment itself, the quality of the professors, the quality of the facilities. We interview students. It's a real process, which I guess the other 116 institutions need to trust that if it is a AAA accredited institution, they can take that student because they will come with the minimum degree of expertise.
That's correct. That is correct. They meet minimum threshold standards.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there aren't issues and recommendations that they're working on. Poland, in particular, at one time was our largest institution in all of Europe because they had extension campuses. And they
Yes, that's right.
introduced a really interesting program. They were and are, as far as I know, the only Adventist institution in the world that offers a degree in biblical tourism. To train
yes, that's correct.
tour guides.
Yeah,
And-
for the Holy Land, they have a thriving tourism from Poland to the Holy Land, and so they offer that degree. And then, yeah, I've been invited to join another one of these tours.
Excellent. Thank you for your
I call
contribution.
I call it a tour, but it really is a lot of work. And they have, because they have 600 students in their media and communication
Yes.
degree. So,
And that's because of your expertise that you are taken there. We also look for individuals with industry experience, but not only technical expertise, somebody who understands the mission and the purpose of Seventh-day Adventist education. Even biblical tourism, many of those students are not Seventh-day Adventists, but it provides us a wonderful way to introduce the Bible history, theology, biblical beliefs, and students who leave from that get a thorough understanding about Seventh-day Adventist faith. What other program in Poland offers that? I should mention Poland for one other reason. They have really stepped up during the whole crisis with Ukraine. We had students at our institution in Ukraine, in Bucha, a town that many people had never heard of before this whole crisis. And that institution has had to close its doors. It's operating online, but many students, especially females, were allowed to leave because of martial law. The male students could not leave the country. And Poland has stepped forward. They've taken many of our students, but other AAA accredited institutions have taken our students in Germany. And right here in North America, Kettering College said, we'll take 50 students. And because of AAA accreditation, those students simply need to get on a train or walk across the border or get themselves somehow to another institution, and we're working with them. And thanks to ADRA, we're even able to provide some financial assistance to those Ukrainian students who are studying at one of our other institutions, AAA accredited institutions.
that's amazing, Lisa. You're describing a real family here, where one sibling struggles, the others pick up and they work together. You mentioned Adventist education as being different from your general Christian education. In what ways is it different?
Well, we have 7 medical schools, and these medical schools have to meet not only our standards for whole person preventive medicine, but also the standards of the region and the country where they are. Let me give the example of
Please.
Rwanda. That's our newest medical school. They have anatomy just like any other medical school, and at the beginning of the first anatomy class, where they had to do dissections of cadavers, the students wore their white coats.
Human cadavers.
Human cadavers,
Mhm.
yes. They have a pathology a laboratory, and in that laboratory, the students wear their white coats. We had a special white coat ceremony first, in which the students were dedicated to God, to the profession of medicine. It was a religious service, and many medical schools have white coat services that recognize the professional aspect of becoming a physician, but we also recognize the spiritual aspect. Then at the beginning of that first anatomy class where dissections begin, the cadavers were there in the laboratory, and the students were all there in their beautiful, clean, white jackets. Sheets were draped over the cadavers. And the students had a fair amount of trepidation. when the sheet would be rolled back and they would be given scalpels and they would begin their first dissection of a human body.
Wow.
And some students are not Seventh-day Adventists, and they had some real anxieties about that person who's there. Are they going to be watching them while they're doing it? Are they going to come back and haunt them? At the beginning of that, and this happened in Rwanda, where there has been a lot of loss of human life, and there's that old trauma as well.
Yes.
How they're going to feel when they see a body laying there, and will it bring back memories of seeing a neighbor, a family member, or being at a funeral? So there was a lot of trauma, and the chaplain recognized that at the beginning of that first laboratory, with the students standing there stiffly with some anxiety and fear, he started with a devotional, and he gave a devotional about the state of the dead, about the Seventh-day Adventist belief in what happens when you die.
Which is very unique in Christianity. We are restoring the biblical understanding of what happens when you die, and the rest of Christianity sees it differently. But I guess
Very
that
much
has
so.
a profound impact in that context.
So he assured them that as they're doing their dissections, the person is not watching them from afar. The person is not going to come back and haunt them or torment them in some way. And then he asked each student to come forward one by one, and he prayed for them, and he blessed their hands. He had some oil, scented oil, and he put that on there as a symbol of entering the profession of medicine, and that God would attend them in their work. And he prayed for each one of them. That was the way anatomy started. Now, Loma Linda University is another example.
No, but hold on. Let's I can't use the word dissect now, but let's work through this that you just mentioned. I can only imagine the embedded meaning that comes from those experiences. Here is someone who has decided to dedicate their lives as doctors. I'm sure some are there because they like the higher pay that medicine brings. Others are there because they felt called to that. You know, they felt their giftedness could be used in this way. But both of those and everyone in between now have an experience that provides a deep sense of meaning and understanding to that profession.
That's right.
It's not just business as usual. It's not just let me learn the knowledge so I can apply it and make some money. No, there is meaning and purpose in it's a calling. It's not just a job. It's not even just a career. It's a calling.
Absolutely.
And if that is presented through week after week after week after week, I can only imagine the kind of professionals that will graduate from those institutions and the difference that it will make compared to the others. I mean, it's incredible.
And
Loma Linda.
After that first laboratory session, 2 of the students left quite distressed. When the sheet is rolled back and you begin to actually cut into the body of a human being. For one individual, she had lost a family member, and that a flood of memories come back. And people who suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, those traumas come back if they've had a prior trauma, and there can be any trigger when you least expect it. So she left in tears, and the other one also left to her dormitory. But again, the chaplain was standing ready to provide spiritual nurture, and in the case of these students, also refer to emotional and psychological counseling, because a healer also has opportunities to grow and heal themselves from past traumas. When we come to an Adventist school, we recognize that it's not just stuffing the head with knowledge, but allowing and providing space for God to do a redemptive work in the life of that person. And
that's beautiful.
The school was prepared for that. Now, Loma Linda,
tell me.
At the end of their anatomy class, they have a unique service. It's held in the chapel, and all of the students come together. There they have a program called Bodies for Science, where they actually prepare the cadavers themselves, and individuals can donate their bodies to science. And so at that time, the family members of those who have donated their bodies to science are invited to a special chapel service where the medical students pay tribute to these individuals that selflessly gave themselves to further their education. They pay tribute to them as being a teacher and affirm their dignity as human beings, even in their death.
Wow.
Again, another wonderful opportunity to teach about the true state of humanity in the state of death. And
Wow.
most of these people are not members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but another opportunity for witness and to contribute to the development of understanding the sacred calling of being a physician.
And that's just medicine. You could go through all of the different degrees that we offer. The humanities, practically all the subjects.
Sure.
Math, science, English, business, even law. Let's talk about the department that you lead.
Mm-hmm.
How many associates do you have?
4 associates, and each one has been selected not so much for a representation, where they come from, but their capacity to serve the world field. In the department right now, among my associates, myself, none of us were born in the United States. We were all born outside. And one of the qualities we look for, in addition to academic qualifications, the individual must have that, is language capacity and the ability to travel broadly. I'll start with Dr. Hudson Chibuka. He's from Uganda, and he speaks Luganda, he speaks Swahili, he speaks some French, and right now, as we speak, he is in South Africa. He'll be doing a number of site visits there, leading a team working there. The next one is Dr. John Wesley Taylor, who was born in Puerto Rico, and he has responsibility for English-speaking regions as well as for Spanish-speaking regions. And then Dr. Julian Melgosa, he's born in Spain. He has responsibility for all of the Americas, South America, but also North America. He's worked here in North America. He was dean of a department of psychology at Walla Walla University. He's also been a university president. He was the president of the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies. Now, Dr. Chibuka, he comes with a background in chemistry, physics, and mathematics. Dr. Taylor has 2 degrees. He has one in curriculum and also in special education. Dr. Melgosa is a licensed clinical psychologist. And so if you just scan that, one of the holes that we had in the department, well, I have degrees in education, in business management, in theology as a first degree, in public health. But a hole that we had was in the area of theology. A big cluster of programs that we have are in ministry and in theology. So our newest associate who joined just last week is Dr. Richard Sabwin. He comes from Indonesia. That is the biggest Muslim population, and he is a New Testament scholar. He's worked in 2 divisions, most recently Northern Asia Pacific Division, and we are so glad that he's joined, but we needed somebody in-house who is an ordained minister who understands ministerial and theological education. He's the former dean of the seminary at IS. So we have a diverse group, and added to that is our editor for the Journal of Adventist Education. And she is the daughter of a university president at one point, Dr. Shirley McGarrell. Dr. Faith Ann McGarrell is our editor and was most recently at Andrews University.
Wow. That's a great team.
It's a fabulous team. I feel like I have the dream team, and I just thank the Lord for their professional competence and above all their commitment to the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I should add that for Dr. Sabwin, he brings something that we needed, and that is experience in working with non-Christian populations. Our schools work in a number of non-Christian countries, and that requires sensitivity, tact, and also professionalism. He brings those qualities.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about some of the flagship universities that we have. In the U.S., you have Andrews University, Loma Linda University, And then those are probably our flagship universities in different fields, right?
That's correct. And flagship is a good term. We refer to those as our general conference institutions. We have 4 of those around the world, and that means that the general conference is directly contributing a portion of their finances, the budget, coming from the general conference. And that's because we need some institutions that provide the highest level of education, and they cannot be tuition dependent. They have to be able to provide those because we need individuals with PhDs and THDs, that is Doctor of Theology degrees, and MD degrees, and Doctor of Dental Surgery degrees, those highest qualifications. And yes, some of the income has to come from tuition, but they are so important to the mission and the message of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that the General Conference contributes a portion of that budget. So that
especially
includes
because they serve great regions of the world.
Correct.
So in order for us to have professionals in some areas of the world that are more remote and Adventism hasn't grown enough to sustain that, those institutions provide the education that is needed for future leaders and present leaders.
That's right.
In those places. I get it. It's a phenomenal system. So Loma Linda Andrews, then IAS, that's in the Philippines.
That serves Northern Asia Pacific Division, Southern Asia Pacific Division first, but also beyond. And our newest baby institution is the Adventist University of Africa. That serves our 3, based in Nairobi, just north of Nairobi on beautiful Advent Hill, serves the 3 divisions of Africa: East Central Africa Division, the South Africa Indian Ocean Division, and the West Central Africa Division. And that represents 44% of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's based in those 3 divisions. So we need individuals with doctorates at those levels to lead out in church and educational institutions as well as healthcare. The medical school is based in Rwanda. We did consider and evaluate whether or not to base it in Kenya as well, but Rwanda made us an offer that we could not refuse, and for a number of reasons, that was the better place to put the medical school.
And when you say Rwanda, do you mean our church in Rwanda or Rwandan
our university?
Government?
Both. The church in Rwanda and the government. The president of the Honorable Paul Kagame made a direct appeal to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and to Elder Ted Wilson to make the medical school there in Rwanda and pledge support. And it's not just financial support. We need political support. At Rwanda, despite what many people might think, is a wonderful place. It rightly is called the Switzerland of Africa. It's safe. It's secure. I remember when we had some training here at the U.S. State Department, did some training for us traveling staff, and he said that safety is when you're driving down the road and there's a pothole and you swerve to not end up with your axle broken in the pothole. He said security is a matter of going down the road and there's a pothole and someone tries to push you into the pothole. Well, Rwanda's a place where the roads are good and there's also security. You can safely travel. So we needed the medical school in a place where we would not have to worry about the safety and security of the medical school faculty, the students, someone that is centrally located. Governance is good in Rwanda, so we needed a stable environment in which we could operate the medical school.
Excellent. Let's talk about some sizes then. Where is our largest universities in terms of students?
In terms of volume, it would be our multi-campus universities in Brazil. That is the Adventist University of Brazil that's on 3 campuses in Sao Paulo.
My first degree is from one of those.
From Sao Paulo, from Engenheiro Coelho.
Yes, that's right.
That's the new campus, but then there's even a newer one, Hortolândia. So between the 3, there were well over 10,000 students. And then in Peru, again, a 3-campus setup where the main campus is in Lima. They have a medical school as well there. And then in the Altiplano, where the work of education first started by the Stalls, and so that's our 2nd campus in Juliaca. and then also in the Tarapoto, which is in the more tropical part. So again, about 10,000 students there on that. So our flagship universities are not our largest universities in terms of enrollment, but they do serve a unique function, a strategic function. Babcock University and Northern Caribbean University in Jamaica are two very large schools.
Babcock is in Nigeria.
Correct. It's a medical school as well.
Medical school also. I haven't been to Babcock yet, one day. And the other one you mentioned?
Northern Caribbean University in Jamaica, Mandeville, and it has a number of extension campuses as well. And there are a lot of Seventh-day Adventists. I think the ratio, I don't recall offhand, but it's a high ratio, and even the Governor General appointed by Her Majesty is a Seventh-day Adventist.
Yes, that's right. It was 1 to 7.
Sir Patrick Allen.
At some point, yeah. Most universities, secular universities, started hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and theology was the core subject that they started teaching first. If it wasn't for Christianity, we wouldn't have universities as we have today. I think that's a fair statement historically.
Yes, it is.
What is our relationship between our theology degrees and our other degrees? Do we follow in the same path? Tell me.
We are following in the same path, Sam. We are following that same trajectory where our schools typically started with theology. And our very first ones were not just to train pastors, but workers. That was the category, printers. And if I look at Loma Linda University, the very first one was to prepare workers who were nurses. And I don't know if this is well known, but the second degree program, Loma Linda, people think of medicine. It wasn't. It was for the program for cooks and bakers, for which we call nutrition and dietetics today. But those were workers for our sanitariums. That is still the case. We are preparing workers for the church, and business is increasingly that. And that's accountants to work in our churches and institutions, but also for the market in general. And our theology programs, our religion programs are getting smaller and smaller and smaller compared to the growth of other programs in health to meet the health needs of our own health system, but also the community at large and health ministry. Business is another one. Education is where we can. Education is our large programs. In some countries, the government has a prerogative and they will not allow us to prepare teachers. They are prepared by the state. Bolivia, for instance.
I did not know that.
Yes. Well, I think if you want to influence the future of your country, you were president elected, which program would you want to take control of first?
Teachers.
Yeah, teachers, absolutely, because that's where you can inculcate your ideology and you can touch the future long term.
State-operated media for right now, and then teachers for 5 years on. Okay. It seems to me, let me give you my understanding, my reading of what we're describing, and you tell me what you think about it, okay? So it seems that we had a small group of people in the northeast part of the United States back in the mid-1800s. And they understood that God was giving them a mission to proclaim these special messages found in the end of the Bible to every human being alive. And they did not want to organize at all. They were very allergic to organization. But at some point, 20 years on, or just less, they realized, hold on a minute. In order for us to fulfill the mission God gave us, we're going to need some structure. So they organized as a church, which they resisted for a while, but eventually they organized as a church. So the mission has a church rather than the church has a mission.
Organized for mission.
For mission.
Absolutely.
From the outset.
Mm-hmm.
And then they struggled first with health, right? They realized that that God wanted them to take care of their bodies.
Yes, and Ellen White was given vision was given counsel, not only for her husband, who was one of those, but this was a time in the United States where there was health reform of many kinds. So graham crackers, Sylvester Graham, and the need for whole grain, the benefits of whole grain, and dress reform. And what's remarkable to me is how the visions that Ellen White were given steered a central course. It was not to one extreme or the other. It were sensible reforms that they adopted. And it was not all at once. She herself in her life did not overnight give up
everything.
Pork and everything, yeah.
And the first vision she had, it took a while for her to even understand it and to write it down properly, the health one, that is. But that emphasis on health was of paramount importance, not least because the life conditions at the time were much more precarious compared to today. So, taking care of your health then was a matter of...
Microbiology was not even invented yet.
See?
Yeah.
So, right. Then education became another emphasis.
That's right. Again, by vision. The early church resisted that because Christ was coming. Our first work was publishing, proclaiming the work. But as the Lord tarried and individuals like James White became ill and died, and others became older. Initially, we just co-opted the ministers of other denominations.
Now we couldn't do that anymore,
exactly.
And now we needed to educate our own.
We needed our own workers.
In order for the mission to be accomplished, education was of paramount importance.
That's right.
And do we still have that order today, which is the mission has a church, the church has an education system that educates people to be involved in the fulfillment of that mission if they feel called to do so.
Yes.
Because most of our students, they're not even, many are not even Adventist.
That's right.
I don't know if you have
about half are not Seventh-day Adventists.
So half of our students are there to get a great degree in let's say translation services, where they can be great translators in their own careers as they build it. But for those that want to use their gifts and talents for mission, there is an environment where they can learn and do it. When a university decides on what new courses to offer, is there a conversation on how this new course will help to fulfill the mission?
There is. Let me comment though on the transactional or the transformational process of education. Part of it is instrumental. Yes, you go to school to get a job, a degree, and in fact, in the U.S., the number one reason students report why they want to go to college is to get a job. So there's that too. But there's a second part. Seventh-day Adventist philosophy, and Ellen White from the early point saw education as redemptive itself. It is a process through which students were made whole, and education involved the mind, the body, and the spirit as well. I gave you an example from medicine, praying for these students and dealing with those who had emotional trauma, experienced PTSD during the anatomy class. It's an opportunity to hit pause and address that need and help the student become more healthy and whole themselves, and ultimately lead them to make a commitment to Christ. And we hope that everyone will do that. So it's two things. Yes, get a degree, get a job, work in the church, or more likely work outside of the church, but be transformed in that process and come to know and understand the call and claim of God on that person's life. Most students, let's take dentists. Most of the dentists are not going to work for the church. They are going to be self-supporting missionaries. They're going to be the Sabbath school teachers in their local congregations. They are going to be the health ministries directors in their local congregations. The congregation is going to look up to them. They are probably going to be one of the bigger tithe contributors in their congregations, but they're going to be self-supporting missionaries. And we hope that everybody, whether they end up being a marketing director for a car dealership or whatever it is, that a dentist or a nurse working in a public hospital or Catholic hospital, that they are going to be self-supporting missionaries in their context, bringing Christ's ministry to the bedside, to the negotiating table, wherever they are.
That's a fascinating way to look at it, Lisa. Self-supporting missionaries. Yes, you're a lawyer, but in reality, you're a self-supporting missionary.
That's right.
Huh.
Tent maker.
Yeah. In some parts of the world, that's they do that very intentionally. They move and do that.
Absolutely. And support the church financially and become good church members that support and equip others for ministry.
We have this, if I understood this correctly.
But there's one more thing.
Yeah, please.
Adventist education has another goal, and that is to help young people find their life partner. That cannot be underestimated.
So a lot of people laugh at this concept
of funny.
Of going to university to get married.
Very serious. I remember the first student when I was at Newbold. I said, "Why are you here?" She said, "I'm here to get my MRS." It's like, really? And she was serious, and she left with her MRS. So that was good. She met a young ministerial student, and they got married. So that is a worthy goal, and that's part of becoming more whole, finding our life partners who share common mission, common faith, and I celebrate every marriage.
I can see the memes and the jokes already from this concept, but I think you're right. When you have, because here's my observation on that. We'll backtrack it. You mentioned three things. I'll start with this one. When you are in high school, you spend a lot of your time with your friends and mates, hopefully. You know, sometimes we're now so busy and so secluded that our teens are spending a lot of time with their friends online rather than in the real world, even when they could. But ideally, that's when you hang out and you spend lots of time. So you have, around 10 friends. And maybe one or two of those friends you could develop a deeper relationship and eventually build a family with. Then you go to college. Now you're busier. Some people are started to work. So now you have to balance work and studying. And now the time that you hang out severely diminishes. And you cannot have 10 friends anymore. And now you have 3. And from those 3, it's harder now to find the one that maybe you could build your life with. But if you go straight into a career, into a job, then your time is even less, and you have less time now to have multiple friendships out of which you will find somebody. And the more capable you become in your profession, the busier you will get, and the harder it will be for you to find someone. So we have a lot of people in their 30s who really want to build a family. I meet them all over. Right? It's like and women more than men, because women, that there is they
want to be mothers, and
they want to be
hear the biological clock ticking.
Yeah, yes. And let's talk about that a little bit. Let's dive in for the next few minutes. From a very young age, girls seem to develop and mature faster. If you take a 6-year-old playground, a playground with 6-year-olds, the boys are running around, beating each other, and basically whatever they say, 80% of it is unintelligible. It's just noise. Meanwhile, the girls are already sharing complex emotions, and they are very articulate.
Playing house out in the playground, and
all of that. And then you come to the classroom. Now, our classrooms have become I struggle to find the right words, but it's basically, be quiet, focus, and learn this, that, and the other. And it's very structured in that way, which means that boys that just want to move and jump and play and so on, they feel out of place.
Yeah.
And this is a problem. There are many TED Talks about this, and people have noticed that this is a fundamental problem of how boys engage with school. But it's in most classrooms, girls learn to read faster. They learn to speak better. They learn to excel academically. And this continues for a very long time. So there are some degrees that 70%, sometimes higher, of university students are women. And then they come to the workplace and they thrive still. Of course, they've been doing so well so far.
Yes.
And now they're in their early 20s and they're given opportunities because of all the success they've had. And they are very busy. And if they haven't prioritized family, they become busier and busier in their 20s. And by the time they're in their mid-30s, they are now in a managerial position. They are doing really well in their careers. And they don't have time to invest in relationships. They wake up at 5 a.m., they go to the gym, and then they go to work, arriving before everybody else, and they are thriving in their careers. By the time they come to bed, they're tired, they eat something, they go to sleep, and the next day it starts again.
Yes.
There is no time at that point to develop relationships. And then, some resort to different applications on their mobile to kind of meet people in a way that you can bypass the friendship and the hanging out stage. It's like, okay, I'm going to bypass the friendship stage and I want directly a relationship. And of course, what could go wrong with that? Everything could go wrong with that. And sometimes it works, thankfully. But this puts tremendous pressure on these 30-year-olds, and not just women, men also. Okay, I want a relationship. I want a family. Another element of this, which is more biological, our reproductive systems are in their prime between 19 and 20 something. And men spend, and this is a pressure that Adventism in particular places, because we believe intimacy, sexual intimacy, is something that is exclusive to marriage. Now, if you have a guy who is receiving an injection of testosterone every 48 hours and therefore wants sexual intimacy, and they don't prioritize family, well, I'm going to build my career first. So you've got from, 13, 14, 15 until the mid-30s of that long process of wanting, their body needing, wanting, desiring sexual intimacy. And they haven't decided to be celibate. They've decided, I want a family, I want a relationship, but I need to wait for marriage before sexual intimacy. That's tremendous pressure on that front too. So altogether, when you say that one of the functions of our universities, one of the benefits of our universities is to find someone who shares your values that you can build a life with, we can joke about it and meme about it, but the reality is, that's a really important part of building your future.
And then that's part of what is good at a Seventh-day Adventist, especially residential campus. And that is Friday night and Sabbath. At AAA site visits, we have actually written recommendations telling the administration to reduce the number of credit hours required of students, because they have over-focused on the academic. They have so many credit hours in the curriculum or their degree, and they try to accelerate it for a number of reasons: tuition income, to have students get through quicker, to overall reduce the cost of education, because faculty love their subject area so much. But it is a disservice to the students. Students should have a reasonable workload. And on Friday night, and we affirm schools that do this. When I first went to Loma Linda, I remember feeling panicky. I was a theology student, went to study public health, and the library closes at 2 o'clock. And I had a roommate, she was Muslim. 2 o'clock, no problem. She had a Firebird with a bird on the hood of the car. She came from a wealthy family, graduated from Chapman University on the dean's list, and she had a chemistry degree, so she was very good in sciences. But she'd jump in her Firebird and she'd drive over to the University of Redlands, and she'd study on Friday afternoon, she'd study on Friday night.
But you didn't.
Sabbath morning, she did her prayers. She was a very devout Muslim. She did her prayers. She'd jump back in that Firebird. She headed back over the University of Redlands. She would study. I was just mortified at that first. They were on the quarter system. When the grades were posted, I thought, I'm going to get so killed on this, especially biostats. I remember that was when they used to post grades by your social security number. I remember starting at the bottom of the list and going and couldn't find my grade. And I went, couldn't find my grade. Looked again, I was really panicking. It's like, oh my, what happened?
It's so bad I don't even have a grade.
Yeah, exactly. And then I started at the top and I found my grade up there. I was convinced that I would do more poorly because I was not studying on Friday night and on Sabbath, but in fact, the opposite happened. What students learn at a Seventh-day Adventist campus is that there needs to be time and space for worship, for rest. And when I would come back to the books on Sunday, Saturday night or Sunday, I could bring a freshness and an energy that made me even more productive. So students that are on Adventist campus and take time to go to Friday night vespers and then take time to just breathe and look around and notice that cute girl or that nice looking guy, or get involved with the various outreach activities and do a branch Sabbath school on Sabbath afternoon and do outreach projects on Sabbath or teach Sabbath school to children in the community. Those are spaces and times that they need to develop the other parts of themselves, to worship, to allow God to do things in their life that wouldn't happen. And early marriages, I'm not a proponent of waiting till you're 30 or 40 or 50 to get married. When you find someone, nobody's perfect and no couple is going to be perfect, but that you have the basic commitments to and you're willing to make that commitment before God, go ahead, get married.
I agree with you completely. But the finances and so on. I think the idea that when you get married, you're going to live in the same quality of life as your parents did is a big mistake.
That's
you need
right.
to be willing to move to the
Exactly.
end apartment where there's, where there is lots of issues.
Yeah.
But you can afford it, and you're building a life
Yes.
with your partner.
Yes.
It's better financially. It's
Yes.
cheaper financially. I cannot think of anything that is not good, except if they were coddled during their adolescence.
Yeah.
If they had no attempt at autonomy by the time they're 18, 19, 20, then they will spend their 20s catching up with what adolescence should have taught them.
Yeah.
I think in those cases, I would say it's better that you don't, because you're still a child. You haven't grown up yet. You haven't matured. And usually it's a function of parents that overprotect and
Yes.
overcoddled and don't allow, young people to do it, but to explore life by themselves. But if they are adults in their own rights, if they're mature enough, then yes, I think every advantage
I agree.
can come from that. But we know we're rare on this, right? You and I are not the general opinion of the world. Most people have the opinion that you need to build your career first, and then you worry about relationships later.
No, I disagree. And we have a resource. We've been talking about Adventist education, Adventist schools, but Adventist education is not only schools, it's a philosophy. And so that's why our department also sponsors a journal for students, Adventist university students who study in a public campus. That's the majority. In some parts of the world, 97% of our university-age students are studying in a public campus for a variety of reasons. The specialty they've chosen could be finances, whatever reason. But Dialogue Journal is published in 4 languages, English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and it addresses the types of issues that a university student faces. It enables them and supports them to understand their faith better, to be able to live out their faith in every aspect, including those social events that happen when everybody else is drinking or partying. What do you do as a Seventh-day Adventist? What do you do when a teacher is promoting a certain view in a classroom? And also how to share your faith on a public campus and be a missionary there, a Waldensian missionary on those campuses. So dialogue.adventist.org, it's available as an app. And in the issue of Dialogue that is being published right now, there's a wonderful article by Carlos Biaggi. He's dean of the School of Business at Middle East University now, and he shares how when he and his wife got married and finances were tight and they had to get everything, their first bed and the kitchen table and all of the things that you don't get as wedding gifts. And what do they do financially? And to what degree do they follow biblical guidance from the Bible in their finances? Because it seemed like, especially him as a male, feeling that he needed to provide for his new
I remember
family.
that so well, Lisa.
Yeah, that pressure. I've got to provide for her, and everybody's looking, her parents and her, and my own sense of worthiness as a new husband and male. What do I do financially? And that's a wonderful article, worth reading.
I'll check it out because I can relate to that very much. I got married 2004, and I went to do my master's at Newbold College, and I didn't work. I was focused on my studies, and my wife was the one that worked about an hour away from our house, so she would drive for 45 minutes to an hour, and then another 45 minutes to an hour to come back. And I remember all those feelings.
Yeah.
You know, I had come from Brazil. I did not have savings or money before. And, you know, Brazil to the pound is like 6 to 1, 7 to 1. It's, you know, it's going in the wrong direction. From the Brazilian real to the pound, you're going in the wrong direction.
Yes.
So I remember all those thoughts and feelings. But isn't that the beauty of seeing a person holistically in education? It's a partnership with my wife that she would work during that phase of our lives, and she would be the one to bring in the funds necessary. My master's was sponsored, so 70% of it was paid, but there was still rent and food and all the rest of it.
And that own sense of personal dignity as a man about providing for your family and being in a position where you financially could not do that. Of course, education is an investment in the future, and it's no doubt
that's the partnership
to where you are now.
Sure, that's exactly the partnership. And then later on, she stopped working, and I was the provider, and that's the beautiful partnership of marriage. It's not just in terms of the relationship itself. I like you, you know, we love each other. Great. No, there is 1,000 business decisions that need to be made as a couple
and also with God.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's the relationship thing. Let's go back to the previous thing that you had mentioned. We have this holistic view of the human being. It is embedded in our theology. It's embedded in our identity, I would say. And that has an implication, which I like, the sentence that I use to describe this is, there isn't an area of your life that Adventism doesn't have an opinion about. Right? Because, okay, it's holistic. God made you, and every area of your life belongs to God. Okay. Then this is God's standard for you. Yes. This is how you live a life of freedom, and God lays that out. Yes. Tell me about the frustration. There are two questions. One, the frustration from non-Adventist students that are required to live largely by the same standards. That's the first question. Yes. The second question is, because we have this holistic view and we have such high standards, what do we do when we fail? Because everyone that's been through Adventist education can tell you at least a few horrific stories of when we failed. Students and sometimes teachers, parents, and others, when we did not live up to the godly standards that we believe. So the first question, how do non-Adventist students adapt to living up to these standards?
It's very important to disclose what the expectations are. Expectations for attending chapel, for instance, for taking certain courses and paying for them, for instance, and also assuring the student that their rights as a student, their intellectual freedom is respected. So every Adventist institution, AAA standard, accreditation standard, is that there must be one religion course taught per year. Even if you are studying medicine or doing a PhD in biochemistry, you have to take one religion course per year. And one of those has to be related to the Bible. One can be ethics, biblical principles of ethics, because ethics can be taught from a wholly secular viewpoint as well. But what does the Bible say about ethical behavior, right behavior? But one does need to be on the Bible. Typically, that is life and teachings of Christ. Who was Christ? That can be taught from a confessional point. It should be assessed, though, in a way that allows for students' own conscience. They need to understand it, and every student who leaves Seventh-day Adventist University should leave with an understanding of what the basic beliefs are. That's not an imposition. They should know that, though.
They shouldn't believe that. We don't require belief, but we require understanding.
Correct.
You at least need to articulate
Yes.
what the Bible, how biblical ethics, for example, is built. But you don't need to believe any of it.
Correct.
We don't demand belief. We
Correct.
do demand knowledge.
Correct.
Got it.
And there may be behavioral expectations, and there are behavioral expectations.
Some of our universities, males cannot enter buildings, female buildings, most of them. And that's very strange.
During open house only. But yeah, I remember even when I went on a college recruitment years ago to look at a state university, and the dormitory they took to was a co-ed dormitory. It's like, ooh, wow. That was years and years ago. That we don't have co-ed dormitories.
If you're not an Adventist student and you come, that may seem very draconian, very old, very old-fashioned, and so on. But we're conservative because we believe in sexual intimacy only after marriage. Right. Let's not create environments where that where we facilitate that. Therefore, men will stay in their dorm and women will stay in their dorm.
That's right.
How do non-Adventist students adapt to this?
They need to know that. And the institution needs to make that clear right from the point of admission. Otherwise, it feels like a switch and bait. Okay, now you got my money, and now I find out I can't party, I can't spend the night over with my boyfriend. By the way, that's not that's an uncomfortable experience for roommates, even on public campuses, where you find your roommate's boyfriend is staying over, and you've got to sleep there too. So there are benefits all the way around on that. But students need to know that before they hand over any money of what the expectations are.
Excellent. They're entering into it willingly.
Yes. And yeah, with consent.
With knowledge and consent.
And I would tell even faculty who were coming to work at Loma Linda when I was the vice president there, what the expectations were on them as well, what they can do in their private home with students present, and what they do when there is nobody there. If they are going to drink whatever privately and they're not hosting students, that's their own private business. But if they are going to go to a conference wearing a badge of our university and it is cocktail hour, they need to know that we expect they are not drinking alcohol.
That's very
publicly.
Interesting.
And they need to know that at the beginning of our committee meetings, we start with prayer, and somebody who's chairing may turn to them and say, Sam, would you offer the prayer today? And are you comfortable with that? They need to know that coming in, because we don't ask before committee meeting, regardless of your faith, are you comfortable with that? We'll just turn to you and ask because we are a praying community. But we don't have an expectation that they join the church, for instance.
To some degree, Lisa, this is that level of transparency and that level of being genuinely who we are. This is who we are, and this is what we believe. We want you to be as comfortable as possible. So if you are not going to be comfortable like this, then this is not the right institution for you.
Exactly.
There are plenty of other universities. Find one.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's go to the very difficult question. Let's address this because I think it really matters. We fail. There are some instances of abuse on our campuses. Every kind of abuse. There are some students who graduated who don't know much, but we graduated them. That has existed in some examples. There are some examples of this. And it almost in every way that you could fail, Adventist education at some point, somewhere, has failed. What do we do with that knowledge and fact?
Okay. Well, there are two levels of that. One is, what do we do if I am the administrator of that institution? I'm responsible. So speaking from that, a faculty member crosses a line in a relationship with a student. As an administrator, they must take appropriate action. What is the range of that action? It can be from administrative leave, suspension. It might even be legal action. If a faculty member has on his or her computer child pornography, that's a legal matter, and the administrator must report that and take appropriate action. If the faculty member has had an inappropriate relationship, there has to be disciplinary action. Those are the failures.
To the intensity of the action.
It is.
Proportionate to the...
Yeah. The disciplinary action doesn't mean that the person's necessarily fired. It might involve and entail supervision, counseling for the faculty member as well. We do seek to be redemptive. I'm not talking about illegal things like child pornography, but the individual will be required to, in my experience as an administrator, to have certain restrictions. They cannot come into the office and use their computer, for instance, before a certain time, and they must leave at a certain time. They must engage in counseling of sexual misconduct, for instance. They must engage in counseling, and there has to be appropriate support for the student as well. It could lead to firing, and it has led to firing in certain cases, but just firing is not dealing completely with the problem. We have to deal with the result and the outcome of the problem. Now, what do we do in accreditation? We will determine the terms of accreditation based on the issues in a school. That might be as draconian as terminating accreditation. We don't just do that suddenly. We issue something called a show cause notice, in which an institution must show us cause why we do not terminate accreditation. That's the last point. Before that, there are some very specific recommendations called major recommendations. There could be conditions that they must attain. Conditions typically involve finances or getting clean audits. There might be misconduct or failing around financial management issues. Or it can be a very short term of accreditation where we go back and monitor and assess again. So there's two ways. That is the term of accreditation and the conditions of the accreditation. I'm talking from an accreditation perspective, and then the administrative one. We here at the General Conference we're not the administrators of an institution, so we don't go in and say, you're fired and you can't teach this and so on. We refer that to the administration and the board, who is the one charged with the responsibility for oversight of that institution.
But if they don't take appropriate action, they may lose their accreditation.
Correct.
Which means they cannot call themselves Adventist.
That's correct.
There are lots of different things.
There are financial implications. There are consequences for the students in that program and the recognition of their degrees.
This is a very complex issue. In one way, it's very simple. You did something that is criminal. You'll be reported to the authorities, and
it goes through the legal channels.
Through the legal channels,
right?
And you're fired by the point that you committed a crime.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing, and I just take from my public university experience, where the university, it was a pathology faculty member during a messy divorce. He killed his wife, so the university took action to terminate him, and he sued the university in return because he said, I have not yet been convicted of the crime. So you are now preemptively taking an employment decision about me before a court of law has even found me to be guilty. He was found to be guilty, but the university did jump. It was such a heinous crime that was witnessed.
They wanted to make a statement at least to say,
well,
this is unacceptable.
It's a human reaction. You want to do something right away. So
what would be the appropriate thing to do?
Administrative leave.
Okay, immediate administrative leave.
Yeah, that's the appropriate action. And then allow the legal case to go through. And then after administrative leave, then take action. And another case, we did do that. It was this is not I'm talking about public university when I was an administrator. We had a surgeon who was suspended by one of the hospitals. They said he cannot do surgery anymore. He was one of our surgery instructors. So how do you have a surgeon teaching students surgery when the hospital where he used to do the surgery said he cannot do any surgeries here? So we had him on administrative leave until because he grieved. He filed a grievance. And eventually he went to another university somewhere. But it was a couple of years where we just paid his salary. And we made the decision not to allow him to do any teaching during that period of time. So there are some financial and other costs to the institution in cases like that, but we do need to allow the process of investigation to go through and to hear fully the case and not just react.
You interact with our administrators, leaders, professors, teachers all over the world. To what degree would you say that they are genuinely interested in the well-being of the students and are courageous enough to take action when there is danger, even if it will negatively impact the brand, by taking action, by showing there is a problem when there isn't? And I'm referring to the general culture that can happen when you are so invested in the brand, so invested in the institution, that when the institution fails, you are more interested in protecting the institution than you are in protecting the people. And obviously, we need to care for the brand, but we need to care for people more. How would you say the balance of Adventist education is in the last 10 years that you've been?
Well, I think we have to do
years.
both. We have to take care of the institution, which is a ship, and the people on the ship as well. And that does take time. We were just talking about taking action. And let's think of the great controversy. Why didn't God just wipe out Satan before he was even exiled here to this earth? It takes time for some things to play itself out. I think of a recent case where I was, I won't name the country, but initially I was talking with a prominent church member there. He said it was confusing because this person said this, and this person said this, and this person was trusted, and it took a while for it to become apparent what the real agenda was for this person who had trust. So time is an element that has to be allowed to play out, and I think we have to do both. We have to protect the viability of the institution for as long as is reasonable, and the individual. And I don't think we have to pit the two against each other.
But sometimes that it does happen, or it has happened, that we were so keen on protecting the institution
that we allowed students to be sacrificed, for instance, and that's just wrong.
By keeping staff that should have been let go of, and so on and so forth, and that is wrong, and we need to constantly be vigilant of that.
Yes.
Are you happy with the current policies and systems that are in place that will keep the system getting better and better, where that happens less and less?
I think that our practice as the Seventh-day Adventist Church to meet annually as a world church is a very healthy one. There are people who say the church doesn't change, it just goes on, it's same old, same old. That's not true. One of the main reasons for the annual council every year, that is the world church coming together in between general conference sessions, of course it's to vote the annual budget of the church, but it is also to approve changes in policy called the General Conference Working Policy. And we do that every single year. And there's an entire year-long process through which we evaluate policies and we make changes to that. And part of policies are the committees that we have that oversee work in various areas. So it's a work in progress. We are a work in progress as individuals, as a church, and we are on the move. I think that's a good and healthy thing. We're a global church. with many different cultures and all kinds of opportunities for misunderstandings and non-alignment, and we come together to do that. That is the same in our academic institutions. They are on a 5-year cycle of review at minimum, and if there are issues, we visit them more frequently, and it is that continual process. I think of what we do as like orthodontia. It's, if there's a problem, we just don't yank all the teeth out of the mouth. We put braces on and we exert continuous, gentle pressure of this is the form things should be. These are the standards. These are the expectations. Yes, we deal with things. Sometimes we tighten things up. We loosen things here, but this is the shape. This is what we're going to do over a period of time, and we do it collaboratively. The church is a volunteer organization. We work together, and we work with people's intelligence and minds, and we're not just enforcing compliance, but we're eliciting it. Compliance that is agreed to by all of us. I love how Bob Lemon said it, former GC treasurer. He said, working policy is simply the agreement that we have among ourselves about how we do business. And that's what it is. The policy is not the 10 Commandments.
And it's constantly evolving.
And it constantly evolves.
Lisa, my parents have always sacrificed for me to have the best education, which was Adventist education at the time. When I was 13, they sold their house in Brazil to send me to study in England. And that changed my future entirely.
What an investment. Not only in you, but in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I salute your parents for what they did for that sacrifice. And that sacrifice will continue to yield dividends into eternity.
It's like planting a seed, right? It's and then it blossoms, and every fruit comes from that seed. My experience at Stanbridge School was a boarding school. When I arrived, I was 14 years old. And it was a fascinating experience. The second day that I was there, at the time Hong Kong was still attached to Britain, and it was easy for people to come and study. And we had about 20 Cantonese students. Only one was an Adventist. So you had there were 65 people in the boarding school, so a small boarding school, and 20 of them were Cantonese. And then you had many Africans, many Caribbeans, and the rest of us who didn't fit any of those
What a multicultural
profiles.
mix, and what a preparation for working in a global world.
That's exactly right. So I had so many nationalities that I interacted with as a teenager. And
not only in the classroom, but negotiating
everything
in the residence halls on Friday evenings and putting cultural programs together. And
that's right. Yeah. And some of it was very shocking, and some of it was wonderful. So the second day, this Cantonese student pulled out a knife to me in the corridor and said, "I'm the boss here. Don't, all that power dynamics that you had." And I thought, okay, how do I handle this? How do I deal with this? I didn't even have enough English to tell the preceptors what had happened. So
the pantomime knife.
Like, I don't know, a knife. How do I do this? Eventually, this guy and I became good friends. But it was I entered the world there. I was born in a small town in the remote part of Brazil, and all of a sudden I'm here with all these nationalities, having a British education. And day after day, I gave myself to the academics and to the life of the school. But I think the greatest contribution that I had from Adventist education is that I was taught grace. And it was my final year, and I was bored. When you have disagreeable teenage boys who are bored, it's a recipe for disaster. So I and a friend of mine and I, we faked a student card, which looked better than the original student card. And I bought a liter of whiskey on a Sunday. I had never drunk. I had no idea what that would do. But I thought, let me give it a try. So I took it back to the boarding school, And in my room, between him and I, we drank the whole thing.
Oh, my.
I don't remember much of what happened.
Yeah.
I was told that I went to the TV room and sat in the preceptor's lap. I was told that I run around like a headless chicken across the campus. And my friends wanted to knock me out. They gave me a cold bath to try and get me out of the alcohol. This was around 2 p.m. By that evening, I began to be aware of what was happening. So here I am, Lisa, 16 years old, contemplating what I had done. I had to be expelled, I thought. This is it. My parents invested everything they had on me. And now it's over. Because of one stupid Sunday that I decided to be adventurous and do wrong. More than that, the shame of it was I was the spiritual leader for the students in the boarding school. I represented the boarding school in the church, and I represented the church in the boarding school.
So you really
Can you imagine the shame of it? It's like I'm supposed to be a spiritual role model for people here.
So how were you feeling at that point?
Awful. I thought I'm not worthy to be alive is how I felt. And I thought, okay, let me tell my parents. I learned early on that you need to be the first to tell the story. And the more truthful you are in telling the story, the better. So I called my dad. It was expensive to call. At the time, there was no WhatsApp or mobile phones.
The 10p coins,
yes.
the big...
in the boarding school, they had 2 public phones. It was, the minimum, I think, was 50 cents, 50p. So £1 at a time. And it just had a bag of coins, and it kept throwing them in, and the time, you know. So I told my dad what I had done and how I ended the dream. Everything they dreamt for me, I thought was over. And my dad's response was the first of the shift. He said, Sam, look, everybody has the right to make their own mistakes. Wisdom is learning from other people's. Clearly, this was a mistake. It's your prerogative to make those mistakes, but you will live with the consequences of this mistake. But your home is here. So if you are expelled, then you are more than welcome to come home, and you're my son. We'll live through it. I was forgiven by my dad before the alcohol had weaned off. That was probably the worst mistake I had made up until that point. Then I went to sleep, and the next day, my friend and I, we went to visit the principal so that we would know when to leave. Dr. Andrea Luxton was the principal. She welcomed us in, and I was expecting a long speech. There was no speech. She said, Sam, you preach here. There is nothing I can say that you don't already know, and there is nothing I can say that will make you feel more guilty and ashamed than you already are.
She was very perceptive.
And my friend and I were like Adam and Eve in the garden, you know, waiting to die. We knew that was it. And in his case, it was even more complicated than mine for multiple reasons. Then she handed a list to us each. And on top of it, it said community service. And she said, I'm going to give you 20 hours of community service each. You will be able to work in the school or at the church or any other NGO within the area. And when you finish those 20 hours, then I hope that during that time you will think long and hard about your choices and how this can be a shifting moment for both of you. She prayed with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I left. When we left, I cannot describe to you the feeling of a shame that had been lifted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty. I did something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
My father forgave me. The school has forgiven me. God will forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to live under this shame. And
Mm-hmm.
which is probably how I understood Adam and Eve. They were
Mm-hmm.
expected to die.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, God says, your descendants, hold on a minute. Dead people don't have descendants. And that's probably why Adam ends the dialogue with God, and he looks at Eve and says, I'm going to call you Eve because you're the mother of all the living. It's a joyful moment for them. For the people who expected to die, and that's how I felt about the community service hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, 20 hours, that's nothing. I can
That's
do
right.
this, but I'm not dead.
Yes.
I'm not going home.
Yes.
The dream is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
As it happened, the person who signed off on all of my community service was the head deacon of the church, a certain David Swain. And I had just started dating Amy Swain, his daughter, who's now my wife.
Oh.
So my introduction to my future father-in-law is to sign off. And him and I, we never needed to talk about it after that.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing was an amazing experience. I'm telling you this because I have seen, I think, Adventist education at its best.
Yes. The redemptive nature
nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just academics, it's not just spirituality, it's not just the physical, it's sports and so on. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of it put together.
Absolutely.
I've seen it at its best.
Yes.
We could also share stories about how you and I have seen it at its worst.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Until the second coming, how confident are you that we are going to continue to make it better and better so that more and more young people are redeemed and are able to then serve as a consequence?
I'm confident of that, but Scripture tells us that there are wolves among the sheep, that there are tares among the wheat. And Scripture's counsel is good. Don't rip up everything. Wait for the harvest. Some things we need to live. Yes, when we can take action, we should take action. But it is not our job to go scouring and pull up every single tare. We need to be vigilant as administrators that there are wolves among the sheep, and be vigilant for that and take action where we can. But that's not the primary job of what we're doing. Now, I think it was important to reference one statistic, and that is longitudinal research shows that those who attend Adventist schools are more likely to make a commitment for Christ. They are more likely to get baptized. They are more likely to remain Seventh-day Adventists later in life. They are more likely to marry a Seventh-day Adventist. And they're even more likely to pay tithe, worshiping with their money. So there is research to show, yes, Adventist education has a result many years out. That doesn't mean it's perfect. We need to be vigilant. We need to recognize and take appropriate action. And that's what we do through accreditation.
Fantastic. Lisa, we're going to wrap this up. I would like you to speak a few words, and then if you could pray for us. But if you could speak, you could look at this camera if you'd like. Students, teachers, and parents. So students of Adventist education, the staff of Adventist education, and parents. What would you like to say to them? And then if you could pray for us.
Yes. For students, I would say take your concerns to God. I know many right now are worried about money. How am I going to get the money I need to attend Adventist school? My parents won't support me. I don't have enough. Take that to the Lord, and then talk to the administrators. Is there something you can do? Is there some work that you can do? And you will find that there is a blessing in that. The Lord has blessings in that. I look back on my own experience. I didn't have the money to attend, and I did canvassing. That was tough work. I also worked on every single holiday that I had. And those experiences prepared me for what I'm doing now. For parents, just like Sam's parents, I would say invest in your child's future, not just in this world. Yes, they will get a quality education from Adventist schools, but educate for eternity. And for teachers, much rests with you. You are the representative of Christ in the classroom. And Ellen White says that the qualification that rises above all qualifications in a teacher beyond their academic qualifications is love. That a teacher loves students and sees in them candidates for the kingdom. May God bless you, each one.
Please pray for us.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the ministry of education. We thank you for the vision that you gave to Ellen White. It wasn't just a doctoral or thesis on beliefs, but that education is in itself a redemptive work. We pray for students in Adventist schools. We pray for students who are in a public school, and especially those on a public campus. Strengthen their faith, put a guard around them, and provide opportunities for them to share their faith where they are. We pray for parents that you give them wisdom. There is a tripod of parents, of church, and school all together upholding the development of students. We pray for teachers, bless them, enable them to see students as you see them, as candidates for the kingdom of heaven. Some students are very difficult to love. Their challenges. Pour out your love into the hearts of teachers so that they might love them as your proxy.
Amen.
We thank you for your grace, for your goodness, for Christ, who is the master teacher and our soon returning King. We pray in his name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining us, Lisa. And thank you for listening to this episode of A&N In Depth. Next week, there is more, and we thank you for every minute that you spend with us. It is very meaningful to us. I'll see you next time.